Hi, I'm Ronnie West.
I'm Jeremy, Dr. J.
This is Good Parents, Good Children.
You'll be smarter than you were an hour ago. So today we're dealing with the question of how can we know that punishment is inevitable? And it really comes down to this idea that punishment is anything, any action that decreases behavior or any intervention that's intended to decrease behavior. And sometimes we think that's relegated to spanking or a timeout, something an adult does to a child. But really, it's ubiquitous. The punishment is everywhere.
Right.
So we start with, all right, your kid's running around the living room being a terror, and you okay, do a timeout, and because you want them to quit. But also, if you're in the kitchen and your kid wants some cereal, and so they're screaming at you, and it's like, no, like listen, I'm not gonna give you what you want because you're screaming at me. But if they wear you down, they've punished you for that withholding behavior.
Right. So then that's a great example of how punishment is not just something adults or people in higher authority do on purpose to kids or people in lower authority. It's more than that, because you just gave an example of the child engaging in a behavior that punishes the parent and could change the parent's behavior.
Well, fair enough. And it's in society too, with our children. All right. We send our kid out to the playground to play with the other kids, and if they're socially awkward, they're going to eat some punishment for that. If you walk up stilted, and it's, hey, do you want to be my friend? Like, you might get like no, and the other kid just runs away, and then your kid's less likely to do that sort of thing. So they've been punished, right? And by the way, if you don't develop those social skills and you take them out into the workplace, you're going to be implicitly punished because you're going to miss out on promotion opportunities, on special projects, and you might not ever get, unfortunately, that corrective feedback of what you're doing wrong. But it does work in reverse, like you're saying about these bidirectional relationships. If we have kind of our new employee come in, and this has happened fairly recently in the news, where we have the new employee come in and, like, listen, company, you really have to bend like to my requests, right? And we can have
you can kind of imagine what kind of parents they might have had, or the kinds of relationships they've had in the past that they would think that's appropriate.
Sure. But if you're an owner or a manager, you can end up getting punished for like trying to create a strict and functional workplace.
Right. Well, and that's back to this idea that it's everywhere and it's ubiquitous. There's something we've been talking about, which is the idea that as parents and people in authority, and in all your relationships, but in particular with parents, you can choose how you are going to punish. You can choose when you're going to punish. You can choose your reasons and your strategies. So, the when and the how and the why, but you can't choose whether or not your child is going to experience punishment. If you don't dole out the punishment, it's going to come from their peers, their potential mentors, and other social relationships.
Well, one of the reasons that we wanted to do this, that we wanted to make parenting videos, is many of the things that we use in our families, that we've seen other wise people doing, things that we learned in our training in psychology and counseling, we didn't see being very widespread. We certainly didn't see it being talked about.
Well, people feel uncomfortable. I mean, we're starting off with our first few videos here about punishment, and people feel uncomfortable advocating for punishment. It's like that Rolling Stone song, "Sympathy for the Devil." It's like, this is not something people feel comfortable advocating for or defending. They feel, the people that are defending a non-punishing, what is often under the moniker of positive parenting, the people that are defending that are shouting it from the rooftops. It's sort of the new gospel of gospel of parenting. And of course, we're not saying that strategies that they advocate for can't be useful. I don't want to jump the gun, but what we're trying to advocate for is, if you use all of the tools that are effective and you use them purposefully with your planned intent in mind, knowing what you're shooting for, then you can be more effective as a parent and you can reach the goals of parenthood better. So you described this kid that walks up to the playground and you said they're stilted and they have these poor social skills and all this stuff. You described a normal 2, 3, 4, maybe 5-year-old.
Sure.
So there's no problem if a cute little 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old walks up to the other kids that are that age and they say, do you want to be my friend? And then the other kid will say, Mom, I made a new friend. And everybody's happy and excited. You're doing that when, hopefully.
Yeah.
If you're at that level of socialization when you're 8 or 9 or 10, you're so far behind. And you're right. The other kids that are socially aware, they're just going to reject you out of hand. And so basically, once you fall behind, you're going to see the situation where you're way in the back, behind the other kids, sort of in the race for competency and the race for social competency. You're in the way back of the race, and it's just going to get worse. And so we're really hoping that some of the concepts we're discussing are going to help parents avoid that ever happening.
Yeah.
Kids don't have to fall behind. They can do better with that stuff.
Well, what about this new wave though? This positive parenting, because we believe it's coming from a really good faith place of wanting great quality relationships with children. So, I mean, the counter argument is, well, what if I just choose not to punish? Like then what happens?
Right. So again, some of the strategies that really dedicated positive parents can use can be useful, but one of two things going to happen. One, you're going to have to spend more time trying to get the results you want because you're throwing away useful strategies, right? Punishment that is done well can be very helpful and effective, and it can work. It can be useful. So if you throw away that tool out of your toolbox, then one of the two things. Either it's going to take a lot more time, or it's just not going to be as effective. So you're not going to get your kids to the level of social competency and to avoid the negative behaviors to the same degree. That's a big part of what we're concerned about. And the other issue is, we alluded to this, that the punishment is coming down the road. You're going to have the punishment from peers and potential mentors, and so they'll be getting it instead. They'll be getting it from them instead of from the parents.
Right. That's the main thing. But also, if you elect to try not to punish your kids, they're still going to punish you.
Right. Right. So there's punishment in the relationship, whether you want it there or not.
Oh, that's absolutely it. Because if we're, if you're going down the street and your kid is screaming in the back seat, and you're a good positive parent, so you're going to want to enhance that relationship, and you don't want to do anything that would be classically punishing. Well, they're still getting you to do less of the thing you want to do, which is ride around with them in the back seat, right? So you're actually limiting peacefully, and so there's actually kind of limiting that quality time that you get together, because hey, I don't want to go out with you because you scream at me the whole time.
Well, the other challenge, and I think that your illustration helps bear this out a little bit, is it seems like the positive punishing folks are shooting for this sort of collaborative relationship that abandons the authority hierarchy, something like that. And the collaboration is great. We want the collaboration, but collaboration is earned. It's not something that is given at the beginning. You're not equals. There is a hierarchy of competence and of responsibilities. The parent has all the responsibility. Well, not all the responsibility. The parent has the massive lion's share of the responsibility when children are small. And then hopefully the child is learning to become more competent. They're doing the things they need to be doing. And then they earn a more collaborative relationship. So you can give them more responsibility and more freedom over time. But you don't want to just jump into the collaboration when it's unearned, giving them that. You don't want to give that early.
Now, what about kind of how we've been taught that punishment's ineffective or even like immoral, like it's an evil thing to do?
Okay, so first of all, punishment as we're conceptualizing punishment, it's unavoidable. So if it's unavoidable, then it can't be immoral. It's going to happen. So this is something that the children are going to be experiencing. If we decide to not do it planned, deliberately, and overtly, then chances are we're going to do it. It's just going to be subtle and in the background. And we may not even be articulating how we're doing it. So the punishment will be less effective since we choose specifically what punishments we're going to use. So it's sort of in the background. And that's only speaking to how punishment might be in the background. If we try to avoid punishing, even if we were successful as parents to not punish, that doesn't change the fact that the teachers, the potential mentors, the other relationships, the other kids, and future later in life, the punishment is coming their way. So right. I mean, there's this question of like, well, isn't punishment immoral or isn't it ineffective?
Isn't it like a violation of children's rights?
Children's rights. And so the problem with the rights question most of the way that we conceptualize rights, and this is sort of a deep philosophical question we don't have time to really get into, but if you think about rights, the way that we conceive of it, it's like rights, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, right to bear arms, these sorts of things, right to not have certain kinds of search and seizure, this sort of stuff.
Sure.
All of those rights that we think of that are articulated, those are rights of non-interference. Okay, so you take a full adult person who is responsible for themselves, and they have the right to not be interfered with in a variety of ways. Okay, well, children aren't fully responsible for themselves, and a huge part of what parents do is interfere with their kids. So so the concept, thinking about it in terms of rights, just doesn't get it quite right. It's not the right way of looking at it.
It would seem to be that instead of like children's rights, or instead of thinking like, okay, parents ought not do this immoral thing to children, you'd think instead that there were a responsibility of parents to do things for children, right? And like punishment fits into this responsible parent modality where you're actually trying to get some output from your child. Like if the goal of parenting is to produce virtuous and competent adults,
right,
then we've got to put boundaries around undesirable behavior. We got to put boundaries around behavior that's not going to be accepted in society, that's not going to be useful. And matter of fact, we've got to introduce things into the child's life that's going to enhance virtue.
Exactly. And we're doing the children a favor by preparing them in this way. So what we're proposing is, it's not exactly that children don't have rights, but it's that the right way to think about this is to think about parental responsibility for the children, because parents are already responsible for how the children behave now. They're the ones that are ultimately responsible for what their children do and how, and they are to a large extent responsible for how kids continue to turn out and where they are developmentally and where they end up. Obviously, it's not just the parents. There's more to it than that, but they are to a large degree responsible. And so looking at children's rights like it's in a vacuum just doesn't work.
Well, and so since punishment is inevitable, like, don't you want the punishment to happen on purpose? Like, don't you want to target the behaviors that are the most important in your home? Don't you want to shape your children in the way you'd hope they grow, and not in kind of the random way that your more baser instincts or society would mold them?
We live in a world the way that the world is. We live in the real world. We don't live in our preferred world. And so once you accept the idea that your kids are going to run into these negative consequences, these punishments, then why not, instead of letting them go out unprepared for that, why not use punishment and a lot of other tactics to help get them ready? And then you overtly and clearly give the lessons. It's like, this negative consequence, and then these rewards and these other things you're doing, these are happening because you need to behave in this way. This is what you need to be doing. And you're deliberately helping prepare them in that way.
Right. So you can't not punish, but you can choose if you do it well or not. You can choose if it's intentional or if it's accidental.
Right. Right. So we're choosing milder consequences, short-term consequences that are explicit so the lessons are known, versus kids, and not to leave this behind as well, from a loving source, right?
That's
the
right.
Parents love the children, they give the clear lessons, and the punishments are deliberate and planned. The alternative would be punishments from people whose intentions are not nearly as clearly loving, right? Potential friends, peers, bosses, just other relationships. The lessons are implicit, so that you can be punished and not even know about it. So these would be situations like promotions that you never had a shot at, jobs you never got, opportunities lost, people that you never get to befriend or go on a date with because you weren't virtuous and competent in the right sorts of ways, and you are punished by life and nature and society because of it.
Well, and so in this way, we want to conceptualize of the home as a mirror to the outside world.
Yeah.
And you want a mirror that's an accurate reflection. So the major danger is trying to protect your child and not punish them in the ways that the world is going to, and instead to prepare them. Matter of fact, it's actually merciful. I punish now so that the world doesn't punish later, right? So the corrective feedback happens when the stakes are so low versus when you're talking about an adult promotion.
Well, it's like sparring in martial arts versus a fight with an enemy that wants to hurt you.
Yeah.
Right. So the sparring, it mimics the same motions, it mimics the same speed, and you get a little bit of pain from time to time, and you're getting the practice, but you get way less injury compared to fighting a real opponent that wants to hurt you. And so that preparation, I mean, you could use all kinds of metaphors to try to show this. I mean, in the Air Force, don't they have simulations for pilots so that the first times they're flying aren't in millions of dollars worth of machinery, right? Like you have simulations. So what we're talking about is punishment, and the other techniques that go along with it are all part of the simulations we're using to get them ready. So the final question here is how can we know, how can I know that punishment works?
Well, tune into our next video to find out. Hi, I'm Jeremy from Dr. J.
And I'm Ronnie West.
And this is Good Parents, Good Children.
Parenting, raising siblings as blood sport.